what is digitalization in the AEC sector, and how it has to be really strategized, and how it has to be implemented. These things we can probably go into a little deep. It will be, of course, it is a starting session. We have to take it forward further in step by step in details. But today I'll be mainly giving the perspective of what is the digitalization we are talking about. It's basically connecting people and data with the complete visibility of the movement of the data and the status, etc., and with the various metadata which are required to be obtained for getting the actual feel of the project and feel of the infrastructure as it goes forward. To start with, basically when we are talking about the people, basically these are the stakeholders. And when you take the stakeholders, the entire set of stakeholders starts with the user, which is on the top of the stack, and they are the real beneficiaries, and they are required to be communicating their requirements down the line. At the same time, the operators and maintainers, which we may not be really taking in our purview at this point of time, because we always talk about projects, we don't talk about the infrastructure asset. I mean, we still have to really look into the wider perspective of the infrastructure asset management, which we are still not doing. We are only managing the project. We are creating the information required for the project, and we are delivering the project. And that is where the stakeholder, which is the owners, investor, implementers, they are implementing. And mainly when we are talking today are the set of people today, I feel we are talking to the supply chain, whether it is design consultants, that means the digital information, the people, the contractors who are the physical delivery people, and the OEMs as well as suppliers who are the supplying various equipments and probably manufacturing and supplying and supporting all the deliveries. So this is what is the people we are. And normally we talk about this information delivery, but this is the requirements which need to come from the top, and accordingly, as per the requirement, this information need to be delivered. And that is where, fundamentally, if you look into it, that is the way it has to be done. When we look at this, the same stakeholders in the perspective of ISO 19650, which is already actually available for us to apply. With two characters, what is the appointing party and the appointed parties. That means our customers or the owners are the appointing parties. Of course, it is a relative terms, and the lead appointing parties are also appointing various subcontractors who are also part of the project team and who are on the task team, etc. This is the representation from the ISO 19650. And as far as when we talk about the data or information, these are nothing but all that is required for in this infrastructure, whether it is for delivery, whether it is for maintenance, whether it is for fabrication, whether it is for procurement, whether it is for anything for execution or inspection or anything else than that. We will be requiring 2D, 3D CAD documents, design calculations, or charts, or inspection reports, anything which is required for the O&M related documents or any other relevant documents which are CAD, non-CAD documents. These are all the information. So we'll be considering these are all the information, and this is what is that information are. And the information, when it is going from one stage to another, and it is being updated, it is getting changed. It gets updated with the new information that are upgraded with the new phase of for the construction, for the maintenance, for any phase of planning to design or planning to preliminary design to detailed design. Also, there are a lot of changes happen, and there is a possibility, and that is probably happening today, that this information is dropping, and that is where we are not very sure about that, uncertain about that outcome, because we may not get back what is really had gone into it in the initial stages, and we may not be able to fallback mechanism in case of there is a issue or there is a indemnity or there is a insurance claim, etc. It will be difficult for us, and that is where that main issue is, that the data drop, how we can arrest. And this is what is happening, that today we are in the information silos, we are in the people silos, and every department, every section is working in their own way. And although we know that it is difficult, but it is possible to break the silos, and gradually, if we take a decision, and we all know that people are the main prime movers of this, but they are generally change adverse, and that is where we have to really work, and that is where we feel that everything is available, whether it is technology, whether it is maybe you can put up the process, but the people, if they are not moving, that is where that issue may be. We have to address this one first. Now, the at this point of time, let us remind that old world where everybody is transferring the documents either through PDF, through the server, or through the pen drives or mails, or any other form. But this doesn't have any control or metadata. Which revision is it, and what is that intent for it? Whether it is complete or not, if people do not know. And many a times, it's even today, people are using, probably the construction has happened with the X revision, and the revision has already gone to the N revision kind of thing. So that is where we may be having an issue. And of course, subsequently, we saw that our IT people tried to connect many people through their, short-lived programs, or maybe the data structure in the server. But that may not be really also having all this metadata collected in that. So that is why that common data environment, which is it's required. The concept of common data environment required to be adopted, where all the data may be connected, maybe stored in one, and it can be generated within this server itself, and it can be accessed by the people who are required. It can be collaborated. It can be used for many purposes, which is required for procurement, construction, maintenance, or anything like that. And that will be also enabling us to really integrate many technologies here, and not only people, many technologies we can connect together, and we can adopt this thing. And this is going to be really a very comfortable journey for us to access whenever, whatever required. And that is where that we are coming to a golden thread, which is expected to connect all the teams, generating so that it can be taken and without any discussion be done. And that is where that BIM process, BIM definition has been formed by UK BIM framework, which is the nodal agency for preparing or even initiating the ISO 19650 series, which is very clearly says that this is the simplest term. It is a BIM is a process, and not only that, it says it is a delivering. It is defining the creating and delivering the structured data and documents, making right information available to the right person at the right time. And this is therefore the life cycle of built environment asset. That means life cycle management of infrastructure, like the PLM. That infrastructure life cycle management is coming in force with this ISO 19650, or with the process in place. So this is where that our interpretation is, it basically a process using the BIM enabling technology and engaging people and organizations with control. With that is where the main important it is. It's a building up the information rich, reliable digital twin for the built environment. And normally, when we talk about this, our engineering process, you will find that this engineering process goes from the photogrammetry. Of course, photogrammetry is a new word, maybe for some few people, but normally we used to use survey. But today it is all digital data which can be connected, or which can be formed, getting the entire terrain data, programmatic camps, and that where we go to conceptual modeling, you go to detail design, and that analytical design, and go for the design review and coordination, and the construction planning and procurement. Then the construction takes care. This is the process. It can all be connected to their common data environment, where all the data can be accessed from there, and it can be used for all the stages, using the technology required at that point of time. And typically the process goes like this. In a design firm, I'll just show you that this is the production team or the design consultants space. It is coming like it can be accessed by every people who are required to be connected, whether it is engineering, whether it is construction, consultants who are approving, and the clients. Everybody can be connected on that. And this is where that we are trying to make you to go for. And this is the dashboard. What we are talking about is a typical dashboard. Of course, there are many dashboards can be connected and can be managed. And this is where that finally the people you can connect. And the good news is that for all these things, the process, the ISO 19650 series is in place, which is already part 1, part 2, which is concept and the delivery phase. The process had been there from 2018 onward, and recently in 2020, within the pandemic, they also released the section 3, which is operational phase, as well as the security minded. There are 2 more are supposed to come, 4 as well as 6, which are of course the various other aspects they are talking about. And the second very good news is that with this process in place, the possibility of integrating people and technologies are limitless. And with this, I'll stop it. But we are there, the group of professionals actively involved in this digital transformation process. We have come together to inspire and collaborate to advance digitally enabled process and technologies in India, and shall continue to extend our expert support to the infrastructure industry. And with this is a starting, we can go forward, go into the details of it. We can probably write in various aspects of the digital process which can be implemented at your place. Thank you, Ashwin. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Swaraj. I think there are 2 big takeaways I had. And of course, we'll come back to this a little bit later when we do the Q&A. First is, clearly everyone needs to, everyone who's interested in digitalization in this industry needs to probably be familiar with ISO 19650, because that is sort of the emerging digital standard. So I think that's sort of a good piece of information. And for those of you who may not be familiar with this, earlier there was a British standard, BS 1192, which is now sort of say advanced or matured or evolved into the ISO 19650 standard. But certainly that's something that all of us need to study and understand. But the second thing that also is a good takeaway from me is you started off by talking about the fact that we need integration, but right now we are in silos, both within organizations and between organizations. So information transfer becomes difficult. There's no single source of truth. Different people have different versions of the same drawings or procurement information. And one of your sort of suggested solutions to that is to implement a common data environment, right, which is across the project, where everyone puts in information and everyone is able to sort of share the same set of information. And that's sort of possibly step 1 of digitization. And I think that's something that during the Q&A, I'd like to come back and maybe ask you a little bit more about how do you implement the CDE, at what stage do you do it across projects, across the organization, etc. But clearly, the common data environment seems to be an essential building block of digitization. So we'll come back to these 2 and perhaps other issues going forward. But I'd like to now move over and ask Sonali. Sonali, could you tell us a little bit about what you think are some of the key building blocks of digital strategies for companies?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashwin and CII, for this opportunity, and a very good afternoon, everybody. So we've heard what Swaraj sir talked about by having a common data environment where we can work together and not be working in silos. What I'm going to share today is at an implementation level, what is it that you can get out of having a digital integrated process, or even just parts of your existing processes digitized? So just going to share my screen. What we are going to look at is where is the future of this industry. It's not just about what is happening at the design phase. During the construction and post-construction, we are seeing a lot of applications of drones and digital twins, and sustainability is also something that all of us are very keen to adopt on our projects. 3D printing. So we are seeing all new technology, new ways of building. And to do that, we need to have some digital adoption happening within our organization. Also, post-COVID, we've realized that we need to not be dependent on just labor at site, or materials not being there, and so constructions delayed. So we need to look at newer technology adoptions, have to have a smoother process from design to execution to operation. Next one. So what was happening yesterday was we would have cost overruns. We would have lack of good quality material, or even our cost estimates were not very accurate, thumb rule calculations. We would have a lot of risk because there was delays that were happening. Um, and we want to avoid all things that were happening yesterday, and we want to do a better job today, which is we want no delays. We want to monitor our projects in real time. We want trained manpower who can do this work for us. We want early clash detection. So a lot of things that we want today, which we didn't want yesterday. And building information modeling is actually the first step towards starting this whole digital journey. And all this is possible once you adopt BIM and the further technologies also. Next one. So who stands to benefit? It's not just the owner who's going to benefit, or it's not just a contractor, but everybody who's part of this supply chain, right from the owner to the architects to contractors, MEP contractors, and even in the operation and maintenance phase. Everybody stands to benefit by some kind of digital adoption. It doesn't have to be the entire life cycle. It can be parts also, but there's different benefits everybody can get out of this. Next one. Now, before we look at what has worked for people in different projects, there's some myths that I want to put up and quantify them as myths. One of the myths is that it's costly. So it's actually not costly. It's just that we are not looking at how much the benefit, what is our ROI going to be. The moment we start looking at what I'm investing and what I'm going to get in return, the cost becomes secondary because your savings are much more. Second myth is it's for big players. Very wrong. Anybody can adopt a BIM or any other digital technology. Lack of knowledge and understanding, maybe 5 years ago that was the case, but now it's not. We have a lot of young talent available who helps us with the adoption. And there is people who are ready to learn. So it's not something that is a hindrance anymore. Also, uh, not I mean, if just the architects are using it, or if the contractor is using it, there's less benefit. That is also not a correct assumption. Anybody who's even one player in the entire supply chain adopts this technology, they are going to be benefits that you can get out of it. Next one. So I'm going to walk through some of the work that we've done for projects in India. Now, this is a residential project where we build the entire model for basements, parking, and the superstructure floors. Again, just the clash coordination. If you see the images here, there's a ramp and you have your piping hitting the ramp. You want to get your quantities out for a small flat, you can do that. So there's a lot of visually issues that you can identify, and there is definitely time saving because of that. Next one. So on a project that we worked in, this was a building that was already built, and 5 years later, they wanted to build the same building again. The as-built drawings that we received were really not as-built. And when we build this model again for the same project, the clash detection and resolution was completed in 1 month, whereas the first time it had taken them 3 months. So this time saving is a very big advantage. We are not looking at just cost here, but the time that you save in the design process also will benefit as we go ahead in their execution. Next one. Mumbai Airport, this is amongst the early adopters of having BIM models, using them for coordination. And imagine a project of that size and complexity. If they have not used it, how much more time they would have spent in resolving the clashes. What was also done here is once the model was built, as it was getting installed, we had people on pads, iPads, and tabs walking on the site, viewing the model just to see that it was getting installed correctly. So, from an as built perspective or during execution, identifying challenges early on, that is another big advantage of having a model. Next one. This is an infrastructure project. So this is 3 islands in Doha. Not that this cannot happen in India, it does happen. So here, before even any land is sold, the entire infrastructure planning is done using a model from the design phase. During construction, everything that is being built on site, the site utilities, the signaling, the signages, the striping on the road, everything is being monitored. What we also did here is that as the construction was happening, we had laser scans. So everything that is buried, the services that were buried, were captured through a laser scan, and an accurate as-built model is available and an as-built set of 2D drawings. So this goes a long way when we get into the maintenance and operations, and doesn't mean that it is only at an infra level we need to do that. At our individual project level also, having an as-built which we can use to better manage and maintain is very important. Next one. Industrial units, nothing stops us from using technology only for building or infra. But in an industrial unit where we have so much piping and we know that people are using 3D modeling and technology, there's tremendous benefits to be had. So it's not in the coordination, again, in the as-built and maintenance phase also. Next one. This is a township in India, in Pune actually. So here again, at this scale, if we have an road and site utilities model, if we have the building model, it just helps us better in terms of savings of quantities. So once we have a model, we can extract accurate quantities. And on a single building, the cost implication of any mistake we make is not as much as it's on a project of this size. Next one. So here is an example of different quantities that can be compared. So if we had a tender quantity in this project, the tender quantity is from a 2D drawing based on a thumb rule calculation. And look at the consumed quantity. There is a huge difference between these two. And this gives us an opportunity. I mean, for any owner, they don't want this. They want it much more accurate. We don't want these change requests and variations coming for quantities. So when we extracted the BIM quantity, it was much closer to the consumed quantity. And the only reason it doesn't match is because here you cannot factor in wastages. Wastages cannot be calculated, whereas in consumed, there is some amount of wastage. So imagine if we had a model from which we extracted the quantity and floated a tender, we would be much more closer to what we are consuming rather than from a thumb rule calculation. And then once we have these quantities, we can even use them for procurement, we can use them for bill verification. So it's not just in the design phase, it's all integrated across multiple phases. Next one. This is GeoWorld Reliance. So they've been using BIM through the design phase, through construction, and currently the entire asset management data is being incorporated back into the model. So from a facilities maintenance perspective, for a project which is a retail, a mixed use kind of a project, this has tremendous advantages. Next one. This is a hospital, actually, Doha, existing hospital. Now, this example just goes to demonstrate that we don't have to do any kind of technology adoption only at the design phase and through construction. So it's an existing hospital, operational since 2016. So we took the data, 2D drawings, built an as-built model, and the entire goal is from an operations and facilities management perspective. So every fixture, every piece of equipment that's in the hospital is built into the model. It's linked to a facilities management software. So when you are searching for, say, I want to change, there's some power issue in this room, and if I have to fix it, I want to know which distribution panel my supply is coming from. Just having the model which tells you what is the parent-child relationship. So the child is the light and the distribution panel is the parent. So you know where I need to go and turn the power off. Otherwise, without a model, it will take you time. It's not that you cannot do it, but it's just going to take you much more time. So this kind of intervention at an operational level, once the project is completed, also brings in a lot of benefits. Next one. So this is another high rise in Mumbai. Omkar is the developer, 3 towers. When you have a project where the floor plate stays the same and you have multiple towers, there also you can get a lot of benefits. You can identify all your challenges, all issues that you can face during construction on one tower and save exponentially by using that in the towers that get repeated. Again, here, when we started the work, the entire structure was ready at site. And the MEP had to be coordinated with the existing structure. And the goal was that I want to make the least amount of core cuts, least amounts of cutout, and then try to complete the work on time. So there is a different kind of involvement that happens at a project of this nature. And I think yeah, today anybody can go and see these buildings are up and running. So a lot of benefits there also. Next. So I think my goal today was just to show that whatever technology adoption we are talking about is not a pipe dream. It's happening on projects of various sizes, various scales, and not only out of India, but in India also. My advice is that don't wait. You should start whatever journey you want on your technology adoption now. It can be a small step and it'll evolve. So any thing that we as CDCP can help, we are here to help and do all the hand holding that we need as you go on the journey. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sonali. Again, I think a couple of things really clearly struck us from that presentation. One of them being that, like you said earlier, it's for everybody. So everyone from just real estate developers to large infrastructure developers to architects to contractors, there's something in it for everyone. I think your range of examples showed that. And secondly, I think there are also a range of things that people can do, from simple visualization to extracting quantities to coordinating and all of this. And qualitatively, I think you've clearly established that there's a benefit. But during the Q&A, I'd like to come back to you and perhaps try to see if we can connect everything you've shown to the quantitative benefits that you had indicated, up to say 300% ROI. So it'd be interesting to sort of hear your thoughts on which of these kinds of applications do you think tend to lead to higher ROIs versus lower ROIs, at least to start with, which can then give people a little bit of a hint as to where to start. And then the second thing that you touched upon was also to say that training is an issue, or used to be an issue, but it's no longer an issue. I mean, there's enough talent that's available, and I think that's also something that will be on people's minds as they start to develop organizations. How do they get talent? How do they partner? All of that. So I think both of those questions: where do we start with? Where do we get the biggest ROI in the beginning? And how do we actually? What could our talent strategy be? Are things that maybe I'd like to come back to you. But I think it's clear that from your presentation that everyone can benefit, irrespective of how big or small they are. So thanks for that. What we'll do is we'll have Sunil present next before we get into a full-blown Q&A. So Sunil, can I invite you to share your thoughts, please?
Thank you so much, Ashwin, and pleased to be here. And I think organization right now glad to represent CDCP India, Confederation of Digital Construction Practitioners. I think, and happy to be here. Knowledge sharing session. So I'll probably, I think Swaraj started well with the process part, and Sonali has actually touched upon the real life examples for people to really understand that it's happening. People have already progressing with that. I'll probably touch upon very quickly on going into like grassroots level applications, and I more talk about like if somebody has to start this, somebody has to get started, what should be probably the approach or how one can really look at. So most of the time people have, people look at a lot of things, and then at some point of time, they're confused where to start with. And that comes as a very important question. Now, the bigger, learning I would say that, we have drawn while implementing, digitalization or BIM on several projects in India. I think one of the learning is that the most important thing that is one of the key success factor in any of these technology adoption program is how flexible are you and how adaptive are you to the changing processes, because whatever we are talking right now, it requires change in the existing process, whether you want to migrate from your traditional design process to a 3D based design process, whether you want to adopt common data environment, whether you want to deploy a digital twin. It actually changes the current SOPs and the current business processes, current people, skill levels and all. And it is our adaptability. The organizations which are more flexible, they change fast. The organizations which has, little more rigidity, we see that, there are challenges out there. And most of the time, like, digitalization becomes like, when we see it, it's like every hospital has a preventive health checkup plans, and where you can go and make sure that you are always up to date. But then when we go to the hospital, when we have a problem, like when I have a headache, I go to the hospital. When I have a so we go specifically when we have a need. And that's also one of the approach from an India perspective. When we look at a lot of areas, one is to look at what digitalization is all about and the bigger picture. Second one is, I have a problem right now, let's look at solving that problem. So today, in subsequent slide, I'm going to touch upon what are those low-hanging problems which automation and digitalization can solve, where you start picking that up. But moving forward, before I kind of get into the examples or sample illustrations, there's a question every time when we get into the the implementation related discussion. Sonali touched upon like one of the aspects that people feel that it is costly and all. So most of the time there is a confusion with reference to the ROI, or there is a perception that drives the thought process in different areas. So when you really look at now digitalization and we are talking about technology adoption, there are fundamental things that we do, and those fundamental pillars are I've just classified based on our experience. The first part is when we do any intelligent or anything which is a genuine digitalization program, the first thing is we try to create reusable assets. I don't know if you have seen now, Disney had used one of the scenes of probably one of their cartoons in another scene. So this is cartoon and media industry, which is actually using the same script, same digital assets in multiple movies. Now, when we talk about our buildings, our infrastructure projects, these are all digital assets that we are creating. The more parametric, the more organized this digital data is, the reusability increases. We'll be able to play with that data. And the moment we are able to play with the data, the outcomes are faster, the results are better. We squeeze the turnaround time, the manpower saving comes up from there. So that is where the first part of digitalization is looking at your company and say that, okay, fine, I have, where are the data? Are those data in reusable format? Do I have my accounts data in a format that can be reused and reproduced? Do I have my design data in that format? Do I have my procurement data in that format? The more quantum of data that you have. So first part for digitalization is to digitize. And now it is not just to digitize at a level where you are kind of converting a paper into some kind of a digital scan data, but I am talking more about the reusable data. So if an attendance sheet is there, if I just convert that attendance sheet into a Word file, maybe that is digitized right now. But then if I make that into an Excel and then I try to draw analogy, now that is reusable and I'm using that for some kind of analytics. So building more of reusable data, where we are talking about 3D models, digital simulations, and other things. The second biggest thing of digitalization in any organization when you are now looking at is, you have to look at, are you doing any task which is repetitive? Are you doing any task which is, which is more human dependent? Now, those are the areas where we have to eliminate those human intervention. Like, for example, one of the examples that maybe Swaraj spoke about, the first thing that start with was, photogrammetry, or, the data, the as-built data. Now, if you refer an as-built drawing, which has been produced or prepared by a person, so he has seen the site, he has interpreted the drawing into a format of a CAD or any kind of a drawing, and then he provides that as an as-built drawing for the downward consumption of any other designers or operators to use that data. Now, it is a manual intervention where that facilities, drawing, as-built drawing has been interpreted based on the manual pickups or the data or the observations. Now, the moment we replace that with a laser scan, it is an evidence-based data. I cannot manipulate that data. Whatever is there, all the thing comes up to your design board and you can view that, review that any given point of time. I don't have a compulsion that I must, complete my site tour, make sure that all the measurements are done. If I forgot some measurement and I go back to the design board, that will result in error. I don't have to worry about it. I just create a scan, keep that available and use that data whenever required. So that's where we call it building up evidence-based data. And then drone captures are nothing but building up evidence-based data, GPS signals, and making sure that who is where, what kind of data is coming up, and picking up those digital signatures, digital data. So that is where we call about eliminating human interventions with technology. The third part, and this is the most challenging part, is the fundamental of digitalization is creating a transparent organization. What it means is, if I am issuing a drawing, if I am issuing a specification, I don't issue to one party. I'm issuing to a particular project ecosystem, and anybody can consume, and the source of that information remains transparent and remains visible to all the concerned people who need that information. So, for example, if an architect, generally, most of the time when we work on a design projects, we keep exchanging drawings. So when an architect issues a drawing for structural framing plan, he just sends a drawing, for example, currently with a mail to the structural guy, and then he does the exchange of information. At some point of time, the MEP guy is called and he also gets the drawing. Now, MEP guy is not updated on some of the previous drawings. And this is where the confusion starts in the traditional process. So when you have that transparent, like the Swaraj spoke about, that common data environment, which is establishing the single source of truth, whether it is 5D BIM, ERP, I think most organizations has picked up, but ERP is again one of those thing which is we call as like the single source of truth. Now, when we have these three pillars addressed, like you have the reusable data, you've eliminated most of your human interventions, and then you have actually established a lot of transparency in terms of the data environment based on who need to see what, you go to the next level, which is data-driven decision making. Now you have the power to basically apply AI ML scripts to that data. You have the power to use digital twin, because digital twin is all about having rich data onto your access, where you can take decision making, you can take, have access of real-time data. So that is possible when you have all the data available to you, correct data. Okay, so the first task in most of the implementation process is getting the data organized. And about 95% of the data in our construction industry is still very unorganized. It's not very organized, you can say. So I would now, with this, giving a kind of a high level view of, probably, what we can look at and how it brings savings. So when this happens, you collectively start getting savings, and which has been registered in double digits. So I will not commit anything, but I'll just give you low end examples. Today, for example, there is a site, and there is also confusion. Sometimes people say, no, our people will not understand 3D, and BIM is not for us. Who says 3D is required for BIM? BIM is a philosophy. You can start the BIM process when you are working on AutoCAD or any 2D platform. Doesn't matter. You can migrate your platform and upgrade one by one, but the BIM process can start in the beginning. So this is one area where, for example, the low hanging fruits, if you have your staff looking at the drawing that is coming from a consultant or coming from a vendor, and if you have a revised drawing that comes from them, and if you spend time in looking at that, if it is not clouded, it is a manual waste of time. Today we have technologies available, and multiple technology. I'm not going to promote any product here. So we have multiple technology available where automated cloud and marking of these changes happens. I can do the automated finding of changes on model if it is available. I can also do the automatic finding of changes on drawings. Just by this task, if a senior manager, design manager spends about, say, 30 to 40% of his time in reviewing the drawing, finding, issues, his finding work is now done by the technology. He only has to address this. So if I'm able to review and reduce that entire organization's design review time by, say, 20, 30, 40% with this, and this is like simple. Sometimes these technologies are available at a cost of 5,000 rupees per user, and it can go to an advance of, say, 50,000 rupees per user if you're going for a very, advanced software. But these are low hanging fruits. So imagine the kind of efficiency that you can really get. The image that you see below is actually a comparison of two models, where you can see, when I do the comparison, I can exactly see what changes happened, where the new additions have come up, what has gone, where it has got deleted. Now the change management becomes much, much faster. And what we have gone is, we have gone one more level up, where we are working on now cloud-based technology. So when you integrate a cloud-based collaboration among your consultant and design team, you are able to see how the design is progressing on a real-time basis. You no more ask for drawing. So you don't have any more questions like, when can I get the drawing? You can just see the status of the model. You can say that, okay, fine, I see that you are actually right now at podium floor. Do you look that, does it look like you can complete this in next 1 week? So you have more predictability into the process. So that is where the power of cloud is actually being leveraged very, very, strongly here. This is next example. So visualization we have all seen, and if you guys have your mobile in front of you right now, you can just scan this digital QR code if you're seeing. Okay. Now what happens is, in a typical visualization format, we give a data for visualization purpose, and when that data goes for visualization, that is a disconnect. Here we are using the same single source of truth. The same data goes for drawing, the same data goes for execution, the same data goes for approval, and the same data is now used for visualization purpose. And visualization has multiple dimensions right now. I can do the visualization for marketing purpose, and I can do the visualization for construction purpose. So what you're seeing here on top is actually a pre-construction visualization. Sonali showed some beautiful clashes and all. So this is one of that, where you can actually see what you're going to build. And what we do is, we also integrate that with this kind of QR code, where the data is hosted on the cloud. You have the control on what is being seen, and all the site can have reference of these kind of data. And this is VR ready. So you can also put on a small VR box and see that data. Now, this is where you start bringing the power of visualization. The advantage at site, today we have difficulty. If you really go and find like people with experience of 15 plus years experience, good construction experience, we don't find such people. And we hire a lot of youngsters in our construction site. The bigger difficulty with these youngsters are, they don't have the experience of reading the drawings. If I give them the same information, this visual that you're seeing here is a combination of at least 20 drawings. These youngsters, they don't have the capability to really interpret the drawing in the way it is required. But the moment we give them a superior 3D visualization, even if they have like 1-2 years experience, they can see that, okay, fine, I have a clash here, I have an issue here, sir, how to fit this here. They can come back with questions. Now, this is where it is dropping down the utilization. You can have your younger resource more productive with these kind of things. The third aspect, okay. Okay. This is where we are talking about now simulative dashboards. Single source of truth. We have the all model data together. We bring that data with all the costings, area statement data, and then you can use tools like Power BI, Tableau integrated with your BIM data to really do the assessment that you really want to do. And you can use this dashboard in a very simple way. Now this is where you start taking, to run the if and else conditions. Now you have like 1,000 drawings equivalent of data, that is available to your discretion. So this is where it helps you in terms of optimizing and making your decision making better. This is design automation. A very simple example. I'll give you. I mean, I don't know how many MEP engineers do we have here, but this was a case where sometimes clash detection is a very I would say in my experience so far, it is a very non-productive process. The more clashes I find, there was a time when we used to find a lot of clashes in the beginning, but then we realized that at some point of time it came through its own learning. You have a lot of that's not very productive process, because if more clashes are coming, your design process or your coordination and collaboration process that you have set up is inefficient. In this project, what we did was we created a script. Using that script, we started giving a histematic diagram, basically a diagram based on the depth of the beam. So depth of the beam or the depth of the slab. Now the darker objects that you see, these depth, they are of one kind of depth. This is another one. The lighter ones are different. So now we have a legend which tells that which are the deeper beams, and we give this color coded layout for an MEP guy to draw his routing. Now the guy who is actually HVAC guy or a fire guy who is actually drawing his routing, he can detect the clash while he is conceptualizing that. So before even the model is generated, we can identify the clash, he can eliminate the clash, and we get an MEP model which is far more superior. So this is how you can use the data, because once I have the digital model, I can run tests on it, I can run analysis on it, and we can create whatever we want as a data. This is another example. This is the railway project where generally, if you look at the program, the
Sunil, just wanted to put in a time check. So if you could
quickly
wrap up.
How much time do I have?
Get into more discussion. Maybe could you wrap up in about 5 minutes?
Okay, wonderful. So this is another example of visual sequencing, where if you see the data, we have like again multiple discipline drawings. We have schedules which are running in 100 of task list. Now, when you have these kind of data to simulate, it helps a lot in terms of doing the construction mock. So this was this particular image was used in for shutdown simulation of one of the railway projects. We're working on currently one 3D printed house, and in India. So this is again the future. The more we start using this, I think currently there is there is some limitations in terms of the kind of structures that you can build. We can build only small structures, and there are limitations to it. But I think as we go forward, this is where the entire integration of the way we build the digital data and how that will be picked up directly by the CNC machines and fabricated. This is also another example when we use like area statement, like in most of the projects when we build up area statements, we use AutoCAD. So if you use AutoCAD, most of the area that is written on AutoCAD drawings are manually written, and what actually is different. And there are always issues on the drawings. When we audit some of the AutoCAD files and when we audit area statement, we find that there are issues there. When we use a model-based data, there is because everything is data extracted. There is no chance for error there. This is again an example of the scan that I was talking about. More of plan versus visual, whether you use like any scanners or 3D60, photograph things, but you have a much better plan versus actual visualization when you are using these kind of projects. This is again procurement standardization and material standardization. You can actually at your organization level, whatever kind of things you are using with digital assets, you can code those assets, you can integrate that with your ERP or the supply chain data, and you can make a standardized linking between your entire digital environment, both digital environment, the BIM environment, and the procurement environment. So yeah, so I think that brings to the end of the session. So yeah, over to you, Ashwin.
Yeah, thanks, Sunil. I think again, good to see the variety of possibilities. But I also like that very first slide that you had, where you had this framework, right, where you said start with digitizing the data, then let's sort of automate some of that data capture. Let's sort of build an organization that can leverage, and finally, can we then make decisions based on this data? So we do things different. So one of the things that I'd like to come back to you is that earlier, when you looked at this trajectory of how people ought to do things, it used to be start with something computerized, start with 2D CAD or start with Excel and all of that, and slowly work your way up. Today we have all of these other things available, like you say, 3D printing. There's drones, there's photogrammetry. Swaraj was talking about. So, in some sense, can we accelerate that adoption by bringing some of these so-called advanced technologies right at the beginning, or do we have to wait to build up capacity? Is a question I'd like to come back to you on. Okay,
Sure.
but what we'll do is, so thanks to all three of you for your thoughts. We'll now move into the discussion phase, and we actually have plenty of time. I mean, we have literally at least another 45, 50 minutes for discussion, and it is a smallish group. So I think please make use of the fact that Swaraj, Sonali, and Sunil are here. What I will do is I have a question each for all three of them. So I'll start off with that. But meanwhile, for all of you who are attending this knowledge session, please do prepare your questions. What I would suggest is that you raise your hand, and then I can moderate and call upon you, and you can then probably unmute and ask your question if that's possible. I think it's easier to do that rather than to type on the chat. But if for whatever reason you have a connection related issue, then that's fine. Put it on the chat and I'll try to get to it myself. But please do raise your hand if you have a question. Let me start off by just one round of questions to all of the three speakers. Swaraj, just coming back to you, wanted to have you say a few more words on the common data environment. Both in terms of who should own it, if at all there is an owner. Should it be the client? Should it be the architect? And how would you recommend that someone get started with this common data environment, even if they're in the middle of a project already? Right. So maybe you could give us some more thoughts on this common data environment and how people can use it.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very, very relevant question. First of all, it can be done, as Sunil also said, that the common data environment can be done, or even Sonali also said that it can be implemented for any company. Even if it is a small design company, a design consultant, they can have their own common data environment, because it is, first of all, the data which has been created by all the engineers and the managers who are approving it, and ultimately it is being issued. All these things need to be captured in a place where it can be reutilized afterwards, where it can be investigated what has really gone wrong or what has really gone right, or whether it can be improved further or not. Anybody can definitely go for a common data environment, whether if they go for a cloud or they go for a server based, but there has to be a process. There has to be, people has to be connected with their rules and responsibility wise, and there has to be a common system. Everybody follows the same numbering system, same revision system, or the same issue based system. So that is where that the ISO 19650 comes in picture, because these have been all very clearly conceptualized, as well as given the how it has to be done, how it has to be run. Of course, it has been given as a the idea, but you can have your own data. But overall, it has to be that there has to be a common system. Cannot be that the group A or that the architect division wants in this way and that the MEP division wants it this way. That's different thing. But of course, in a bigger perspective, definitely the common data environment has to be owned by the owner. That means who is implementing the project. If in a case where that the owner is implementing the common data environment, or even the implementing agency, where that all these subcontractor, whether it is EPC contractor, whether it is the design consultants, or various, as I have shown in the ISO 19650 configuration or interpretation, whether it's the appointing party and the lead appointed party, or the other appointed parties who are making the groups, as well as the task team, etc., all comes into the picture, and that is where that the ownership has to be there. But it doesn't matter. You can do your own way, your own common data environment, which can be, as Sunil also mentioned in various ways, that these data can be reutilized. And even Sonali also mentioned that once the data is created, that can be reutilized for various other rebuilding, and that is where you multiply the ROI, and you don't know the intangible benefits are so much. And as I said, that the possibilities are unlimited. when you have the common data environment, you can add any extent to any technology. Where you start with it, I mean, photogrammetry, where that all digital your data of a photo, I mean, the digital photography what you have taken for a drone survey or anything, that can be connected to that architectural information, and then architectural informations can be connected to that the structural MEP, or even it can be going for the procurement, or it can be submitted. And this common data environment can be probably sold to that means whatever data you have, you can probably tell your customer that yes, I have all the data available. If you want to buy it, you can do that, or you can have an access for it to be used for construction, it to be used for asset management. It can be, you can probably make use of it, or make I mean, monetize it later on in a various way. But main thing is that it has to be right data, has to be collected, right data has to be monitored, and it can be all stored. It can be all have the process of maturing it to the required level. What is the right data at the right time for the people to use it at the right time? I hope it could give you the information what you needed.
Yeah, thanks. And I think I encourage others, if they have other questions along the CD lines, to voice them as we go ahead. Let me shift to Sonali. And Sonali, again, I wanted to come back to that ROI sort of question. So the number of applications, clearly the application also depends on the projects that you're building, etc. But where have you seen the highest ROIs, if you will? Right? Where do you think people should start? Where do you think they can get the biggest bang for the buck? Or does it not matter? Right, your thoughts?
It doesn't matter actually where you start, but I think what you need to start with is what is important. What is your goal behind the technology adoption? Is it just to use it in the design phase or construction phase? And what you want to achieve. So if I'm looking at in my construction phase, I want to save time, not have to do rework. If that is my goal, then that is how the whole adoption has to be approached with. Also, when we talk about ROI, what we need to remember is it's not, you cannot get a 300% ROI on one project. The entire supply chain has to adopt this technology. The process has to be changed. And only then we are going to get that ROI. So typically when we start adopting any technology on the first project, we I have invested X amount of money in getting the software, getting the hardware, getting people in. Now I want to get X plus 20 as my return on the first project. It's probably not going to happen, very honestly, because I think if that is the expectation, then your technology adoption is going to fail. So we need to go through at least a couple of projects where we iron out all the challenges that are part of this technology adoption, and then look at the ROI. So the ROI cannot be calculated on one instance of adoption. It has to be across multiple instances. And then the cost of investment becomes negligible as we go down to the third project, fourth project. So it's just then you're getting benefits out. And benefits can be tangible, intangible also. So ROI should be calculated from an intangible benefit perspective also. My biggest proof or rather biggest example is that just getting your quantities accurate and not based on a thumb rule calculation saves you when you don't have to procure extra material, saves you when you're doing your bill verification, and gives you an opportunity to do your better budgeting. So for any organization, this means they can manage their cash flow better. So it's not just that I'm procuring enough, but it's if you have multiple projects going on, that benefit across the other projects is also something we need to think about in terms of ROI. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Sonali. I think that's an important message that you may not necessarily get ROI on the first time that you implement BIM, and therefore you have to look at BIM more as a long-term process or a long-term strategy, and gear yourself up so that perhaps the first 2-3 projects are a bit of a learning curve, and then slowly you start seeing the ROI, and perhaps the longer you stay invested, the larger that ROI becomes, over time. So I think it's a bit of a patient game rather than a plug and play game. So I think that's very important. So Sunil, my question to you again is, do we have to start slow, or can we start bringing in all of these drones and photogrammetry and all of that AI, etc. Right at the beginning, now that those technologies and tools are available? What kind of a pathway would you suggest?
I think when you look at any digitalization thing, there are three things in terms of: one is what technology we want to deploy, then the second one is in terms of who are the people who will get impacted, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, and then the third one is in terms of the processes that you want. The ideal way to start would be the bigger part in most of the thing is we can't change the people that we work with. I can't just knock off my consultants and I can't knock off my internal people to say that, hey, from tomorrow we want you to be kind of completely upgraded. The first thing is you should look at, probably every organization have different appetite, and you can just bring a catalyst resource, like maybe 2%, 5% of additional resource to bring and act as a catalyst to deploy those changes. But that people is very important. So if some organization has people who are very tech savvy, who are very used to changes, I think we can start with more ambitious goal. But in my grassroots level experience with most Indian developer firms, I'll tell you where we start with. When we go to the site in most of the construction places in India, we don't have a digitized drawing register. I have a book at site, so I have a site drawing register. I have a design drawing register separate. I have somebody who is basically a document control, and his drawing register is separate. Now, the problem here is that I have multiple versions of this data. So the first part for any organization is document management. It was very difficult. Like if you look at 10 years back, 20 years back, document management is a common name which is very familiar in the manufacturing aerospace industry. The complexity level was low because the entire document management process was controlled very much within that OEM's premise, and he used to give only limited access to some of the supplier, but it was all controlled within. For whether you like it or not, fortunately, unfortunately, the construction dynamics with its supply chain is very diverse. Like I have an architect from US, structural consultant from Dubai, MEP consultant from India, contractor from Mumbai, and then I have some supplier from Chennai. So if you really look at the diversification of any construction project, it's very diverse. So that's where the cloud helps us. So today, if you look at, to start with, anybody is wanting to look at, the document management is the lowest hanging fruit. Okay, that is where if you start with that process, that is like, it is the first step towards getting into BIM. Because when we look at lot of discipline that is required, like Swaraj said, when you want to go to when you want to keep a designated folder structure, keep a single source of data, it requires a lot of discipline, and people don't change over time. In my experience, it takes 2 to 3 years for any organization to even adapt to document management. Forget about 3D and other part. Just the document management, getting that discipline to